Why do humans want to connect with others? Why is it that we feel this strong desire for connection? These are questions for this strange feeling or desire. Typically, when one helps another, they feel a great sense of worth. They feel a great sense of importance. They simply feel that they've done something good. And those gives individuals a great sense of psychological pleasure. So, why? Didn't we say that humans are prone to self-love in the previous segments? Okay. This has a short and a long answer, but for the sake of time, let's take the short one. This can be simply answered by knowing that humans are prone to loving others. You may say this is contradictory and paradoxical depending on what was said in the previous segments, because we said that humans are prone to self-love. So how can humans be prone to loving others? I would say that you have already answered yourself, because being prone to self-love means that humans are prone to loving others, which may seem counterintuitive at first, but bear with me. Both conceptions go hand in hand. The first is the mother conception, which is that humans are prone to self-love. The daughter conception would be that humans are prone to loving others, meaning that there is a cause-effect relationship between them. Meaning that the propensity to that which supplements a human is love, which is just another way of defining love. So they, the humans, will try to bring themselves benefits and shoot out all that does not benefit them or puts them at a disadvantage. And since no human knows everything about everything, that means in order to meet their physical, psychological, and all that is in between and beyond, they will be needing people. Just like they are needing things, and thus they will love those who bring them benefit, and hate those who bring them misery or block their benefit on the contrary. It is the same as someone loving an apple because it satisfied their hunger, or to put it in another way, the apple was the supplement that complemented them. So, in order to meet your interests, you will need people to be helping you, and people that cooperate with you. These others or people are also trying to meet their interest or self-interest too. Meeting one's self-interest is something embedded in the human psyche. Modern biologists and neuroscientists believe that it is there for human survival. I do agree on that notion, but I also say that this is the main reason for building a social hierarchical system. Those who give receive, and the more competent you are in what you do and something that is wanted, the higher you are in that hierarchy. So, you will need people to meet your self-interest for the present and the future based on the situation while trying simultaneously to meet their self-interest. Because why should they go out of their way if you are not going to do anything for them anyway? That means you will need people to benefit from you for them to be willing to offer you what you need and want. Let's have an example. Imagine if you are sick, and you are not a doctor, do not have a clue about this profession and what disease you have. As a result, you will need a doctor to help you. That doctor will help you on the condition that you benefit them, whether it is a mental or at least a materialistic benefit such as giving them money. So, let's have another example. Studies indicate that if you straighten yourself and carry your burden successfully, meaning your responsibility, you will be more likely to have better relationships and occupations. Have you asked yourself why? Well, that is partly because you will be bringing benefit to the people around you, whether mentally or materialistically. So, these people will want you. If you realize that, This is when you know that you are not isolated. It's not like all what I do will only affect me and therefore I will only care about myself and others can do whatever they want because it only affects them and I will do whatever I want. That's a false idea. I personally like how Dr. Jordan Peterson puts it. You are a node in a connected network. But realizing that means that all I do matters. Because it will inevitably affect the people around me and beyond in ways I cannot imagine. But in most cases, we don't really know the cause of something. We only see the effect, which makes people do reckless things. However, every effect has a cause. So, just because we don't know the cause doesn't mean that there is no effect. So we should do the right thing. For example, doing something as small as smiling genuinely to another random person can have enormous effects. You may have made that person's day, and so you gave them the confidence they needed for their job interview, for example, and got the job of their dream, which in turn helped them feed their starving family. So, in this case, you didn't just smile to a random person, you helped a starving family from dying. Not because you can't see or know the effects or causes means that there are no effects or that there are no causes. The largest mountain is made of the smallest particles. The biggest forest fire started from a little spark. Every action has an opposite reaction. This is where the butterfly effect takes place, where the small flutter of a butterfly wing can ultimately cause a volcanic eruption. But this is terrifying, because it means that I should be careful, extremely careful about all I do, because all of it matters, which is exactly right. And therefore, if all I do will have an effect on me, the people, and even the world around me, I should do the right thing. And I think that you have already noticed that this is the hard path. I will be restricting myself and I will be very, very careful about all I do, which can be anxiety provoking. But it will be the right path. And most people have a blind insight, so it is not clear to them why people will choose the hard, meaningful responsibility path rather than the easy, nihilistic path, which is like everything does not matter, so I can do whatever I want and I should not concern myself with others because nothing really matters. Wrong. It's not news that the world is filled with suffering. When someone only lives for themselves, getting the slightest amount of suffering would be sufficient to make them crumble to the ground. This self is weak. It suffers tremendously, especially with psychological pain that results in physiological agony and pathology. Then, they would question, why live when the only thing that I am living for is only suffering? Why live when most of the time I'm suffering? And those people who live for themselves are trying all they can to please that self. They please it by each and every method possible, however horrid and bad. They see themselves as isolated from the world, and I claim that our present reality encourages that in most cases. That's the nihilistic view. And it actually is the easier route out, since it does not require effort. And as we mentioned, some went to the degree of worshipping themselves. You may say that nihilistic people don't even think that they matter. I would say if they feed themselves, if they breathe, if they do something, that means that they have complemented themselves, meaning that they see some value in themselves, whether they know it or not. which is why I am saying that they are living for themselves at the very least. However, as mentioned, this self is weak. So, when the world will inevitably hurt them, they feel betrayed by the very thing that they are living for. Whenever that facade of their self-happiness disappears, their meaning disappears. So, what is there to live for? A very good way of looking at this is in the third conjunction in Carl Jung's theory, which says that you should look at people as an extension of yourself. If you only live for yourself, you can suffer tremendously, so you will need people to help you. You will need a family, a doctor, a food provider, of course, given that you are not a doctor or a food provider, and so on. So, based on the premises given, helping the needy is a form of self-love. But there is something interesting here. Helping the needy or having altruism does not guarantee that the one who did those acts a reward. There is something extremely important here, which may be discussed later in this series. And as we mentioned, methods of dealing with the love of self is the grave mistake made by both the communists and the capitalists, because self-love is the bedrock for survival. The communists tried eliminating it, and the capitalists saw it as the core goal, so they fed it improperly, leading people to worship themselves. Both cases were doomed to fail. When you eliminate it, you eliminate the self, which cannot be, so it fights back. And when you feed it, you feed the self, which and will never be full, thus selfish. And that is discussed in detail in the previous series, The Dystopian Utopia. It is true that balance is key in this situation. Let's take the love that is referred to as romantic love, for example. Two who love one another because he or she saw that the other can bring them their needs, psychological, physical, or materialistic, and that is, which I claim, is the sad reality that is lived by most people in the world. But this will be discussed later in great detail in this series. This love of self might very well be the most dangerous kind of love, since it is inherent within the human, but it should be dealt with extreme measures of care. And when it is not dealt with properly, it leads to catastrophic results. But why? In most cases, people don't sacrifice the present for the future, because the future is very low resolution. Not only that, but because most people in the world are extroverted, which is not something bad inherently, but extroverted people tend to be more present-oriented. So, they have another layer of the challenge to deal with self-love. Again, that is not to say that one should always sacrifice the present for the future, and that is not to say that introverted people don't have an extra layer. They should learn to also live in the moment. However, many people have chosen themselves, or more precisely, their pleasure, to be the core, the goal of goals, perfection. They will take all measures for their pleasure. Similar to happiness and freedom, pleasure is a worshipped idol that leads to the abyss, if was misplaced. Finally, we have covered the building grounds in our discussion. The idea of love, idols, love of self, and the butterfly effect. In the next segments, we will have a look at the results and how these shape the world as we know it.